Okay. Yeah, I just had a video I made. It'll be the one out right before this. It's got some, news about the future of me and everything I'm doing. If you want to go give it a chance, take a look at it. Uh, and uh, this one here is going to be about the lies that is told on the right. Everybody lies a little bit, I guess, but these are the lies that are told on the right. And there's a new book out. There's an author out, and I don't mind plugging his book because I think he's a pretty good guy. I like watching him on the news, but Dana Milbanks has just written The Destructionist, the 25 year to crack up the Republican Party. And he traces a lot of what's wrong with the Republican Party back to Newt Gingrich. And I don't think he's necessarily wrong. I haven't, and I have not read the book, so it's one that if I had time and my health was better, I would really like to read it. I used to read a lot of this stuff, but um, the health issues I have, pretty sure I was drugged or poisoned for being a whistleblower at General Motors. I gave up reading a while ago because I'd read the stuff and then like the next day I couldn't always remember what I had read. And I was in the middle of I think the Order of the Phoenix when I discovered this, and it's like if I spend like an hour or two reading and then the next day I don't really remember what I read. Now I might remember it a week later, but it really screwed me up for reading. So uh, oh, and just if you want to do something to help out for what time I have left, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and maybe share it with some friends. That's something free you can do. It can help. Uh, but I don't think what he's talking about is a complete view of it. I think you can make a case that it goes all the way back to Reagan. Some of what he's talking about, yes, that stops at the Gingrich era. But as far as the lies they told, and as far as the dumbing down of America to believe it, that goes back to Reagan. And I'll do more on that in a minute. I think if you want to do a total look at the downfall of the modern day Republican Party, I think you have to go back to Nixon. Um, this is the one where you had the first clearly criminal president. He was so much of a criminal, he had to stand up and tell people, well, I'm not a crook. Um, and in their effort to steal an election, they were willing to break into the headquarters of the Democratic National Party. That's where it was in the Watergate building. Might have heard of that in history class if you were awake. And a lot of his people went to jail. And then it was also the first time that I can think of where, the next president took an active role in just ignoring the crimes, basically neglected their duty to put the criminals in jail. And I don't think he did it for any malicious reason. I really don't. And I wouldn't have voted for the guy, but President Ford, when he came into office, he pardoned Nixon. And the understanding I had was that he had an agreement with Nixon that after he pardoned Nixon, Nixon would do what they call an elocution. He would own up to it. Well, he should have got that first, or at least he should have got it in writing, because as soon as he pardoned him, the story goes, Nixon just said, "Yeah, fuck it, I got my pardon." And this all came out when Ford's funeral came around, and they said he carried, I believe it was the Burke decision, around with him for the rest of his life. And it's one of two Supreme Court rulings that I'm aware of, where they basically state that if you accept the pardon, you accept the guilt. If you want to be innocent, you have to go through the court process of expunging that record or having it appealed and have it overturned. That if you accept a presidential pardon, you accept the guilt that goes with the crime. You accept the shame that goes with the crime. And but that's where they started. And because of Ford, there's some of these Nixon people that lingered on. Don Rumsfeld, uh, vice president for Bush Jr., he was a Nixon alumni. Donald Rumsfeld, Nixon alumni. In fact, Donald Rumsfeld's the one that got uh, Cheney into the Nixon administration. He worked for Rumsfeld at the time. And Roger Stone's another one that worked for it. Afterwards, Pat Buchanan, Gordon G. Liddy, or G. Gordon Liddy. These are people that all worked for Nixon. Now, from going by memory here, so I'm doing the best I can, but like G. Gordon Liddy, he was a frequent flyer, and I think the Howard Stern show. He used to brag like Trump does. I mean, he was like the original Trump. He used to brag about all the shit that they planned to do wrong. G. Gordon Liddy basically said that if Nixon had told him to kill someone, he'd kill him, and he would have shot him. He talked about in the I can't remember which. I don't know if this was the Ellison tapes. Might have been the stuff about the Pentagon. They were trying to break. They were trying to figure out how to get some information out of a psychiatrist's office, and he said they had drawn up a plan. Now he said this on, like, I don't know if it was a radio show or a podcast, but from what I remember, I think it might not have been Howard Stern, but I think it was. And Howard Stern, if by some strange chance you see this, if you still got those tapes, you should be making this shit available. Remind people. But G. Gordon Liddy had said that they had this elaborate plan where they were going to buy a fire truck and they would have set the building on fire. This is Donald Trump level criminality here. Might even be a little worse than some of the stuff Trump, but that was the plan. They were going to get this in, they're going to set fire to the building, and then they were going to go in under the guise of being firemen. They were going to ransack the place, steal what they needed to, and then, torch the building and leave. And this is what he said. These were the claims I remember him making. Again, doing the best I can with memory. Howard Stern released those tapes if you get this. But he said the only reason they didn't do it is nobody wanted to spend 30 grand or whatever it was to buy the fire truck and leave it there. And I don't know about back then, but when you look at the follow the money bullshit from the Watergate story, it probably would have been, that might have been a smart person say, well, yeah, we're not going to spend the money on a truck and leave it there where they can trace it back to us. But he was really disappointed that they didn't do it. Pat Buchanan, who I believe, and I might be wrong in this, but I believe he worked for Nixon, because I saw him back in the 80s or the 90s where he's saying, well, when the courts ordered him to turn over the tapes, he should have burned them on the White House lawn and he would have still been, and it's like, again, so this mentality that you see from Trump, it's echoes of what was going on in the Nixon administration, at least in some of it. Although Nixon, and I don't think any of his people ever wanted to sell us out to Russia or some other dictator. And Nixon never fired the FBI director for investigating him. He might have talked about it, he might have wanted to, but he never had the balls to do it. And, so you got that. Then you got the Iran Contra scandal that Reagan had, where, they basically broke the law. And I don't remember the broad view of it. They were basically selling drugs to then buy weapons to give to what I think amounted to a terrorist organization. And, and then I've, again, members of my own family, what was so bad about that? Well, he broke the law, asshole. That's what's so bad about it. They wanted the money from Congress. Congress said no. And so they were selling drugs. From what I remember, they were selling drugs to that. Again, going from memory on all this stuff. So, if it's a little off, I'm doing the best I can. But I believe they sold drugs to fund this stuff. And it kind of goes with the other Reagan era scandal. They got behind Osama bin Laden. You might have heard of that guy. You might think of him often around September 11th. But they got in bed with Osama bin Laden so that he would go fight the Russians. and they trained him, they armed him, they funded him, and then that little brainchild of theirs, that's what basically gave him the ability, the training, and the opportunity to pull off 9/11. That can be laid right at the Iran, the Reagan scandal. And some of the people were found guilty on that, and then there was a little bit of mishandling, and I don't know, maybe the judges were in the tank, I don't know, but there was a little bit of mishandling things. So a lot of those people escaped justice because uh, they were under the impression that they had immunity from Congress, and then so that magically made it immunity in the courts. And and again, I'm not a lawyer, so maybe that was the right thing to do, I don't know. You might be able to blame that on human error, I don't know. But that, that was that. And then some of the people from the Reagan era that you see cropping up again, Ollie North, Admiral Poindexter, there's others. uh, I think Donald Rumsfeld was another one. He was a Nixon guy that came over to Reagan, who then came over to Bush Jr. But they recycled this trash. Well, Ollie North, he got a shot. He got a job on Fox News to help peddle the fucking lies, probably. And he ended up working for the NRA, which I firmly believe should be listed as a terrorist organization. Well, he was involved in some way, and he might have actually been doing the right thing. I don't know enough about it, but he was either guilty or he was a whistleblower. I don't know. But he was caught up in another scandal with the NRA over money in that. Admiral Poindexter, a lot of people I don't think are aware of this. This is a guy from Iran Contra. When Bush Jr. got into office, he uh, he wanted to create like a futures market to predict terrorist attacks. And as soon and they were okay with him doing it, but as soon as it became public, he had to go. And so the theme I'm going on here for this one is, if they would have started holding these people accountable in the Nixon era and the Reagan era, you might not have had the Bush administration. Now let's go take a look at him. Okay, you had the Bush administration, and and there's some stuff you could go off on. In fact, yeah, we'll talk about this now. I'm not going to go and find a picture of him, but Daddy Bush, when Iran Contra, when it came to him, Bill Barr, again, another recycle from the Reagan and first Bush administration, he helped, from what I remember, he helped the first Bush pardon everybody that was left over, from the Iran Contra. And the speculation was with Reagan's mental health problems. He had Alzheimer's and dementia. We didn't really know until the end of his presidency or afterwards. But the speculation is that Reagan wasn't really aware what was going on with Iran Contra, because he did a press conference. You can look around and find this. I think it's still on YouTube, where he basically said, he goes, a couple months ago, I stood up and told you that we did not, break the law. And in my heart, I believe that to be true. But he goes, the facts and evidence say differently. So he didn't really seem to be aware of what was going on, you know, and that was a normal thing for the Reagan administration. Uh, but there was some speculation that his father pardoned those people because the investigation would have led to him. Because Reagan either wasn't mentally capable of being coherent for it, or he was just unaware of it. And so there was speculation that that's why he did those pardons. Well, anyways, when he came into office, there's a whole lot of stuff that might not have happened under Bush if they had held his father, if they'd have held Reagan's people, if they'd have held Nixon's people. But by this time, it was pretty well understood that if you were a rich white Republican and you broke the law, you weren't going to be held accountable. That was a normal thing back then. It really was. And you look at, they had a memo that said torture was okay. And this was still like waterboarding. That is something that we executed Japanese soldiers for. There's just not, and again, they get a lot of these legal rejects from Regent University, and they're either corrupt or they're not worth a damn. You put whatever label you want on them. But like, that guy wrote the memo, which then, and this is you've heard it a little bit from the Republicans now. I haven't heard it in And I did ask a question of the president on Twitter and former prosecutor Glenn Kirshner. I'm like, well, I go, here's the thing, and I don't understand this, but if they get a legal memo that says it's okay to break the law, how is that a legal defense? Because I go, I'm pretty sure I was drugged or poisoned for being a whistleblower at GM, and this was the question I asked. I don't want this to be confused with a threat, but I go, if if I found some, brain dead reject from Regent University to write a legal memo that said I legally could go and kill the people and torture them to find out who else was involved for what they did to me or what I suspect they did to me, uh, or if they wrote a memo that said, well, yes, I could kill them and consider it self defense for what they did to me, uh, then I go, would that be legal? Because I go, I have a sneaking suspicion that if I did it, because see, I'm not a Republican. My last name isn't Bush. My last name isn't Barr. My last name isn't, insert every Republican shitbag that's been in there for the last 30 or 40 years. I'm pretty sure that if I did that, and I said, well, I got a legal memo at Regent University, hot off the press, I got a feeling that I would be picked up. I got a feeling that I would be charged. I got a feeling that I would be indicted. And barring some freak of nature with a technicality of their procedures, I'm pretty sure I'd be going to jail. And I asked the question, I go, why are we entertaining this? Why is the news entertaining this? Why are the politicians entertaining this? Why are the DOJ, why are the prosecutors entertaining this? It just seems to me, and not a lawyer, but it just seems to me that if they do have that memo and they go to jail, that they might be able to then sue their lawyer for damages. And in the case of that torture memo, I don't understand why that guy was not put on trial for war crimes. I'm sorry, if he actually was a lawyer and he passed the bar, he should know better than the average person that what he wrote was a crock of shit. And I don't understand why and again, but he got away with it. And if the people that worked for Trump had been held, and this is Obama's fault. You can say whatever you want, but this is not a Republican problem. This is a problem with the Democratic Party. If he had taken Bush's people and either charged them for war crimes or marched them off to The Hague and let them prosecute them, because this was something that came out near the end of the Bush administration when Rumsfeld left the administration. He was doing business overseas, and they got word in Washington that there was a team coming to arrest him for war crimes. So they sent people, they dispatched a fucking response team from the fucking embassy to pick his ass up and escort him the fuck out of the country and get him back to America. Now, you go take a look at Bush, you go take a look at Cheney, Rumsfeld, Condoleezza Rice. Since they've left office, now maybe they have, I don't know, but you always used to hear about her shopping trips to France or whatever, Condoleezza Rice and all that. Ever since they've left office, you don't hear about any of the Bush people going overseas. Now maybe they are, and I'm not hearing about it, but that might be a hint that yeah, if they leave the United States, there might be arrest on sight orders because they were hauling in Nazi criminals in their 90s. And again, I don't know, maybe it's just not being publicized, but you don't hear about these people leaving the United States anymore. You just don't. And but if they would have prosecuted the various members of the Bush, not the low hanging fruit at Abu Ghraib and that, and like Chris Matthews used to say, where are the officers? Where are the leadership? And this is before the one photos came out. He basically said, these officers did not take the dog collars and stuff with them there. These guys were not dog handlers. Somebody gave them that stuff. When they had them guys in leashes and dog collars, he goes, this was probably not part of their, EDC everyday carry as being, just, prison guards. They had one officer who wasn't even there. She was in charge of something like 8 or 9 bases or 17 bases. She was there like once a month for an inspection. She was the one they scapegoated. But pictures came out later, and the cameras were facing the wrong direction, and you saw officers and you saw people in civilian garb standing there watching this stuff. They were the ones clearly given the orders and in charge. We never even found out who they were. That was all swept under the rug. And they scapegoated these guys at the bottom. They did nothing to the officers except for they had to have one little token officer they could slap around. And nobody in the administration was held guilty of this. Well, if you would have put every officer at that base on trial and put them away for it, if you would have put more than just one female general that probably nobody liked in jail, well, that would have prevented the military from doing this going forward. If those guys would have all been held accountable for war crimes, not just the people that probably were on the borderline of what IQ you can have to go into the military, the low hanging fruit, the victims here. But if they would have put the officer corps in jail, if they would have put people in the Pentagon in jail, if they would have put people in the civilian leadership at the Pentagon, the Defense Department and the civilian leadership that's appointed by the president, they would have put them in jail. If they would have put people in the president's immediate staff in jail, Trump would have probably never happened. When he gave like these orders to go and clear these peaceful protesters at a church so he could go and hold a Bible upside down, they wouldn't have done it. They would have been thinking, yeah, I'm not so sure I want to do this. They just had those people in the Bush administration and went to jail. There's a lot of stuff that would have happened that did happen in the Trump administration, but if they would have held Nixon, Reagan, both Bush's people accountable, I don't think that their lawyers would have been willing to do it. And this is a question that we have. We can either deal with the fallout or we can deal with the root cause, and then maybe this problem takes care of itself. Peace out and have a great day.